The blood on his hands wasn't his own. And the woman at his feet, she was breathing her last. Nathaniel Cartwright had seen his share of death out in the Colorado wilderness. Starvation, rock slides, the quick, brutal justice of a frontier dispute. But this was different. This was the kind of death that got men hunted. The kind that ended with a rope. He could smell the copper tang of it, sharp and metallic, mixing with the scent of morning sage. She was just a girl, really. Couldn't be more than 18. Her Cheyenne buckskin dress was torn, ripped at the shoulder, revealing a gash that was ugly and deep. She lay beside a creek, her bronze skin looking pale and strange in the morning light. Her breathing so shallow he had to press his ear to her lips just to feel the faint whisper of life. Then he saw them. 3 arrows, sticking out of a cottonwood tree not 10 feet away. He didn't have to look close to know the fletching. Cavalry arrows. Standard issue. The kind that meant soldiers were near. The kind that meant this girl wasn't just hurt, she was a fugitive. And helping her was a death sentence. Any sane man would have walked away. Tipped his hat to the tragedy and vanished back into the trees. Nathaniel wasn't a brave man. He was a prospector. A loner. At 35 years old, he'd never known a woman's touch. Never even held a woman's hand. The men back in the Missouri lumber mills called him peculiar. His own father had called him a disappointment. He'd come out to these mountains to be left alone, to escape a world that never made much sense to him. But he couldn't leave her. He wasn't thinking about sides. He wasn't thinking about the cavalry patrols or the Cheyenne war parties that had been turning these hills into a slaughterhouse. He just saw a life flickering out like a weak candle in the wind, and he had to try. He lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost frail. Her long black hair, impossibly soft, spilled over his forearm. A fever was already raging through her, her skin burning hot against his. He carried her toward his camp, a small shelter tucked between 2 massive boulders. A place he'd chosen specifically because no one could find it. But now he had brought the trouble right to his front door. He laid her down on his own rough bedroll. Her breathing hitched, and she muttered something in a language he didn't understand, the sound like stones rattling in a dry gourd. It stirred something in his chest, an unfamiliar ache that was equal parts fear and something else. Something he couldn't name. The wound was deep, but it was clean. No infection yet. But the fever was a wildfire, and he had to put it out. He'd patched up loggers and miners before, stitched skin with a fishing hook and whiskey. But his hands were made for axe handles and rifle stocks, rough and calloused. This required a gentleness he wasn't sure he had. He tore strips from his only spare shirt, boiled water, and began to clean the gash. The moment the hot cloth touched her skin, her eyes fluttered open. Just for a second. But in that second, he saw them. Eyes like the bottom of a mountain lake, so dark and deep, you could fall in and never find your way out. "Easy now," he whispered, his voice rough. "You're safe." Her eyes closed again. But not before he saw a flicker of something. Not fear, not anger. It looked like recognition, as if she knew him. But that was impossible. He'd never seen this girl before in his life. Had he? The fever got worse as the sun climbed. She thrashed and cried out, her hands reaching for invisible things in the air. He bathed her forehead with cool water, tried to force drops between her cracked lips. Nothing worked. The fire inside her was winning. By afternoon, he was desperate. Then he remembered. The old Ute man, Joseph Many Horses. He'd met him last winter, traded tobacco for stories by a fire. The old man spoke of things the white man had forgotten. Healing plants, medicines that grew in the high country. He found wild mint by the creek, crushing the leaves until the sharp, clean scent filled the air. He remembered a dead pine tree where he'd found a stash of old honey, the bees long gone, their golden treasure left behind. He boiled the mint into a thick tea, stirring in the honey until it was a dark, sweet syrup. She was delirious now, fighting ghosts only she could see. He had to pry her jaw open, dripping the mixture onto her tongue. She swallowed on instinct, a deep, ancient part of her recognizing the medicine. As the sun set, painting the canyon walls in strokes of orange and purple, the fever finally broke. He must have dozed off, sitting by the fire, his rifle across his knees. But a feeling woke him. The feeling of being watched. He opened his eyes. She was sitting up, clutching his wool blanket to her chest, studying him. Those deep water eyes were clear now, and focused entirely on him. "You saved me," she said. Her English was perfect, just a slight, musical accent. The sound of her voice shocked him more than anything else that day. "I found you by the creek," he managed to say, his throat dry. "Couldn't just leave you." She touched the clean bandage on her shoulder. "The cavalry. They came to our camp. We ran like rabbits." She looked up at him, a shadow passing over her face. "Are your people safe?" He shook his head. "Don't have any people. Just me." "My name is Ayanna," she said. "It means eternal blossom." "Nathaniel," he offered. She nodded, as if committing the name to memory. "You have gentle hands, Nathaniel. Most white men have hands like stones." He felt a flush of heat creep up his neck. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from a woman who looked like she was carved from the sunset itself. The torn dress had slipped, revealing the smooth curve of her collarbone, and he had to force himself to look away, back into the fire. "Why did you help me?" she asked. The question was quiet, but it landed with the weight of a boulder. "Your people and mine. We are not friends." How could he explain it? He didn't understand it himself. He poked at the fire, watching the sparks spiral up into the endless night sky. He'd lived his life by a simple code: survive. And survival meant staying away from trouble. Ayanna was the kind of trouble that could get a man killed twice over. "Wasn't thinking about people," he said, the words feeling clumsy and small. "I was just thinking about you." When he dared to look at her again, her expression had softened. "My grandmother told me stories of men like you," she said. "White men with hearts that remember the old ways. Men who see a person, not just a color." "Don't know about that," he mumbled. "Just did what felt right." She lay back down, pulling the blanket up to her chin. But her eyes stayed open, fixed on him. "In my tribe, when a person saves your life, they become responsible for it. You own my breath now, Nathaniel." A shiver went through him. "I don't want to own anything." "No," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "That is why my breath chose you." She fell asleep then, a deep and peaceful sleep, while Nathaniel sat and watched the fire burn low. He told himself that in the morning he would help her find her people, and then he would go back to his prospecting, back to his quiet, empty life. But as he watched her face in the flickering firelight, he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that he was lying to himself. His quiet, empty life was already over. The sun was barely touching the canyon walls when she woke. Strength was flowing back into her, a visible change. She sat up, testing her shoulder, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "The pain is less. Your medicine is strong." "It was knowledge from Joseph Many Horses," he said. Her eyes widened. "You know the storyteller?" "Met him last winter. Good man." "He is my mother's cousin," she said, and her smile grew. It transformed her face, wiping away the haunted look and revealing the young woman beneath. It made his chest ache in a way he didn't understand. Perhaps this meeting was not an accident. "I'm just glad I found you," he said, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks again. "You are not like the other white men I have known," she said, her gaze intense. "How many have you known?" "Enough," she said, and the smile vanished. "Traitors who cheat with a smile. Soldiers who kill for sport. Men who take whatever they want. I'm not one of them." "No," she agreed, her eyes searching his face. "You are something different. Something pure." He'd been called odd, quiet, a failure, but no one ever had called him pure. They shared his meager breakfast of hardtack and black coffee. She ate slowly, but with every bite, More color returned to her cheeks. The glassy sheen of fever was gone. "Where will you go?" he asked. "North. To the winter camps. If any of my people survive the soldiers, that is where they will be. That's 3 days' hard ride. You're not strong enough. I am stronger than I look." "I don't doubt it," he said. "But you're not stronger than a Colorado winter. There's a storm coming. I can smell it." As if he'd summoned it, a cold wind gusted down the canyon, rattling the pines. It carried the iron-hard promise of snow. Ayanna shivered, pulling the blanket tighter. The words came out before he could stop them. "You could stay, until you're healed, until the storm passes." She looked at him for a long, silent moment. Her dark eyes were unreadable, giving nothing away. "Would you want that, Nathaniel?" The question hung in the air between them. All his life, he had avoided wanting things. Wanting led to disappointment. Wanting led to pain. He had built a fortress around his heart, stone by careful stone. But looking at her, with the morning light in her hair and his own blanket wrapped around her shoulders, he felt the walls of that fortress start to crumble. "Yes," he said, the single word feeling like the biggest risk he'd ever taken. "I would want that." Her smile returned, small and private, but it was enough. "Then I will stay." As she spoke, the first snowflakes began to fall. Fat, wet flakes that melted on the warm ground. But Nathaniel knew that higher up in the mountain passes, the snow was already sticking. Soon, the trails would be impassable. They would be sealed in this canyon together. He should have felt trapped. He should have been terrified. Instead, for the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. The storm hit them with the force of a physical blow. For 3 days, the world outside their small shelter was a howling chaos of wind and snow. The canyon disappeared, the sky vanished, and all that existed was the space between the two massive boulders, and the space between the two of them. It was a space that grew smaller with every passing hour. They talked. She told him of a childhood learning to ride a horse before she could properly walk, of a grandmother who knew the secrets of every plant that grew on the mountain. He told her of the brutal noise of the lumber camps, the crushing loneliness of a city, and the day he decided to walk away from it all. "Why gold?" she asked him on the second night, her voice soft across the crackling fire. "It seemed like something a man could trust," he said. "It doesn't change, doesn't leave." "But gold is cold," she said. "It cannot keep you warm at night. It cannot care for you when you are sick." "No," he admitted, "but it can't hurt you either." "Nathaniel," she said, and her voice was so gentle it made his heart ache. "Nothing that matters comes without the risk of being hurt." He knew she was right. He'd spent his life avoiding that risk, and all it had gotten him was an empty life. On the third night, the storm finally began to break. Ayanna fell asleep near the fire, exhausted. In the dark hours before dawn, a sound tore through the quiet. A scream. She was caught in a nightmare, thrashing against the blankets, fighting an enemy only she could see. He didn't think. He just moved. He went to her side and gathered her into his arms, just as he had that first morning by the creek. He held her against his chest, her head tucked under his chin. "Shh," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." She settled instantly. Her body relaxed into his, her breathing evening out. In her sleep she pressed closer, her hand clutching his shirt. And in that moment, holding her, protecting her from the ghosts in her mind, Nathaniel understood what it meant to be needed. Not for what he could do, but for who he was. When the morning came, pale and bright on the new snow, she woke in his arms. She showed no surprise, no shame. It felt natural, as if this was where she had always belonged. "Thank you," she said, her voice husky with sleep. "For what?" "For chasing away the darkness." They didn't move. They just lay there, wrapped in the blanket, listening to the profound silence of a world buried in snow, feeling the shared warmth that passed between them. "Travel will be impossible for weeks," she said eventually. "Probably," he agreed. She lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sorry?" He looked into her eyes, those endless mountain lakes, and found he couldn't lie. He couldn't hide. The fortress was gone, washed away by a storm and a quiet voice in the dark. "No," he said. "I'm not sorry at all." Her smile was his answer. The days that followed fell into a strange, comfortable rhythm. They were a team. He hunted, checked his snares, kept the fire alive. She showed him a hidden world he'd never known existed. Wild onions buried deep beneath the snow, the inner bark of a pine that could be ground into flour. She taught him how to read the clouds, how to walk on the snow without making a sound. He taught her how to clean a rifle, how to sharpen a knife until it could shave the hair from your arm. They were two people from different worlds, building a new one together in their hidden canyon. A partnership born of survival, but growing into something more with every shared meal, every quiet look across the fire. Then, one morning, everything changed. He was checking his snares down by the frozen creek when he heard them. Voices. English voices, sharp and cold. Soldier voices. He moved back toward the camp, silent as a shadow. He peered through the trees and his blood ran cold. 5 cavalrymen. They were tearing his camp apart, kicking over his supplies, their hard, cruel faces scanning the rocks. The sergeant, a man with a face like a bulldog and scars on his knuckles, spat into the remains of their fire. And Ayanna was gone. A dark, terrible rage rose in his chest. Had they found her? Had they taken her? The thought of their hands on her. He had to stay calm. He circled around using the boulders for cover. The soldiers were talking, their voices echoing in the still air. "She's here somewhere," one said. "The tracks don't lie." "Could have moved on," said another. The sergeant laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Not in this snow, not wounded. No, she's here. And so is the man who's been helping her." He kicked a stray cup into the snow. "Standing orders are clear. Any Indian found off-reservation gets a bullet. Anyone helping them gets one too." They weren't a search party. They were an execution squad. Suddenly, a voice rang out from above. "You are not welcome here!" Nathaniel looked up. There, on the canyon rim, 50 feet above them, stood Ayanna. She was a dark silhouette against the bright winter sky, and in her hands she held his rifle. It was leveled directly at the sergeant's chest. The soldiers scrambled, fumbling for their weapons. "I would not move so quickly," she called down, her voice clear and steady. "This rifle shoots straight, and I have nothing left to lose." The sergeant held up his hands. "Easy now, girl. No one needs to get hurt." "You killed my family," she said, and her voice was as cold as the ice on the creek. "You burned my home. You have already hurt everything I have ever cared about." "That was a different patrol," the sergeant said, taking a step forward. "You're outnumbered, 5 to 1. You might get me, but my men will get you." "Maybe," she said, "but you will still be dead." It was a standoff, but Nathaniel could see the other soldiers spreading out, looking for cover, looking for a clear shot. They were closing the trap. In another minute, she would be surrounded. He had a choice. He could stay hidden. He could save himself. He could watch her die. And he knew, in that instant, that he couldn't. He stepped out from behind the boulder, his own hunting rifle coming up to his shoulder, the sight settling on the nearest soldier. "Actually, Sergeant," Nathaniel said, his voice ringing with a calm that shocked him, "the odds are 5 to 2. The sergeant's head snapped around, his eyes wide with surprise. They were caught, pinned in a crossfire. "Well, well," the sergeant sneered, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his face. "The white Indian lover shows himself." "Just a man protecting what's his," Nathaniel said. The sergeant laughed. "What's yours? Boy, you've been in the wilderness too long. You can't own a savage." "I don't own her," Nathaniel said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "But I will die before I let you harm her." He spoke the words, and in his heart he knew they were the truest words he had ever said. This quiet, lonely man who had never kissed a woman, who had never loved anything, was ready to kill and die for the girl on the cliff. You're still going to hang, the sergeant snarled. But we'll take the woman first. You're not taking anyone, Nathaniel said. You're going to get on your horses, and you're going to ride away. I have my orders. Then you'll die following them. The silence was absolute. The tension was a wire pulled to its breaking point. It was the youngest soldier who broke. A kid, no older than Ayanna. He made a panicked move for his sidearm. Nathaniel's rifle bucked against his shoulder. The crack of the shot was deafening, echoing off the canyon walls. The young soldier crumpled into the snow. Then, chaos. A second shot cracked from the cliffs above. Ayanna. Another soldier went down, screaming, clutching his shoulder. Nathaniel worked the bolt on his rifle, chambering another round, the motion smooth and practiced. The fight went out of them fast. 2 men down, caught in a crossfire from protected positions. It wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter. The sergeant screamed for a retreat. They scrambled for their horses, dragging their wounded with them. "This isn't over," the sergeant bellowed as they galloped away. "We know where you are. We'll be back." Nathaniel watched them go, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked up. Ayanna was already climbing down, moving with the grace of a mountain cat over the slick rocks. She reached the camp and walked straight to him. Her eyes were wide, filled with a look he had never seen before. "You stayed," she whispered. "You could have run. I told you I'd protect you. You risked your life. For me." She was standing so close now. So close he could smell the scent of pine and wood smoke in her hair. So close he could see the tiny flecks of gold in her dark eyes. She reached up and touched his face, her fingertips tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was like a brand. "You are not like other men," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She rose up on her toes. And then she kissed him. It wasn't a big kiss. It was just a soft press of her lips against his, a whisper of contact. But for Nathaniel, it was like being struck by lightning. The world tilted on its axis. Every wall he had ever built around himself, every fear, every doubt, turned to dust and blew away on the winter wind. She pulled back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "My chosen one," she whispered. And the words hit him harder than any bullet ever could. That night, everything was different. The kiss had changed the very air they breathed. "They'll be back," Nathaniel said, staring into the fire. "With more men. We can't stay here." "Where can we go?" Ayanna asked. "The passes are still snowed in. There are other places, hidden places." "Running again," she said, and there was a weariness in her voice. "Always running." "Not running," he said. "Moving. There's a difference." "What difference?" "When you run, you leave things behind," he said, looking at her across the fire. "When you move, you take what matters with you." Her eyes met his, and he saw understanding dawn on her face. "And what matters, Nathaniel?" The question was a bridge, and he knew he had to cross it. All his life, he had been afraid to name the things he cared about, for fear of losing them. But fear seemed small and foolish now, compared to the truth he saw in her eyes. "You," he said. The word was simple, but it held the weight of his entire world. "You matter." A smile broke across her face, as bright and beautiful as a mountain sunrise. "Then we will move together," she said, "wherever the trail may lead." When it was time to sleep, they laid out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, the way they always did. But the space between them felt different now. It was charged with unspoken things. He lay there, staring up at the sliver of stars visible between the rocks, and he could feel her watching him. "Nathaniel?" Her voice was as soft as falling snow. "Yes." "Are you afraid?" He knew she wasn't talking about the soldiers. "Yes," he admitted, the honesty of it surprising him. "Of what?" "Of caring this much," he confessed. Of not being enough. Of losing you." "Come here," she said. He hesitated for only a heartbeat. He rose, walked around the fire, and went to her. She lifted the edge of her blanket, an invitation. He lay down beside her, and she fit against him, as if she had been made for that very spot. You don't have to be afraid alone, she whispered, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder. Her breath was warm against his neck. I've never, he started, then stopped, not knowing how to say it. I know, she said gently. It is in the way you touch me, as if I might break. You are precious, he said into her hair, more precious than any gold. She lifted her head, her face just inches from his in the dying firelight. You speak like a man who has found his treasure. I have, he said. I found you. This time, when she kissed him, it was not hesitant. Her lips were warm and sure, claiming his with a fierce tenderness that stole the breath from his lungs. He had imagined what a kiss might be like in his lonely 35 years, but his imagination was a pale, pathetic thing compared to the reality of her taste, her scent, the way her body melted against his. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. My chosen one, she whispered again against his lips. This time, he understood. It wasn't just a name. It was a promise, a destiny. Your chosen one, he answered. And he knew it was the first time in his life he had ever been exactly where he was supposed to be. The sound of horses shattered the dawn. Nathaniel came awake instantly, Ayanna still asleep in his arms. For one perfect, stupid moment, he thought they could stay there forever. Then the sound came again, closer this time, and the dream evaporated. He slipped from the blanket, grabbing his rifle. He peered through a crack in the rocks. Soldiers. At least 15 of them, picking their way up the canyon. The sergeant had kept his promise. Ayanna, he whispered, shaking her gently. Time to go. She was awake in an instant, her eyes clear and alert. There was no panic, only a grim acceptance. How many? Too many to fight. They moved with a desperate, practiced speed. In minutes the camp was packed, essentials strapped to their backs. They left the rest. Food, extra blankets, anything that would slow them down. Their only chance was a hidden trail he'd found weeks ago. A narrow ledge that climbed the sheer face of the canyon wall. A place the soldiers called Devil's Backbone. They were halfway up the cliff when the first shots rang out from below. The soldiers had found their abandoned camp. Bullets chipped at the rock around them, sending shards of stone flying. The climb was hell. The ledge was barely a foot wide in places, slick with ice. Every step was a gamble. Ayanna moved ahead of him, sure-footed as a goat, while his heart hammered against his ribs with every gust of wind that threatened to peel them from the rock. They finally reached a small platform, a 6-foot square of rock jutting from the cliff, and collapsed, gasping for air. They'll follow, Nathaniel said, his voice ragged. Let them, Ayanna said, a grim smile on her face. The path ahead gets worse. She was right. The trail descended from the ridge into a labyrinth of canyons, a maze of stone where a man could get lost and never be found. They moved through a forest of stunted, snow-heavy pines, the world silent except for the crunch of their boots. When they emerged, it was into a place that shouldn't exist. A hidden valley, miles long, carpeted in green grass that poked through the snow. At the far end, a hot spring bubbled from the rocks, sending a column of steam into the cold, still air. It is a sacred place, Ayanna breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. My grandmother told stories of it, but I thought they were only legends. They made their camp by the spring. For the first time in weeks they were warm. They were safe. As night fell, they sat by the steaming water, a pocket of impossible paradise in the middle of a frozen hell. My grandmother said the spirits guide the pure of heart to places like this, she said, moving closer until her thigh pressed against his. A pure heart saved me. A pure heart brought me here. He felt the old discomfort rise in him. He was no one special, a failure, a loner. But when he looked at himself through her eyes, he saw someone else. Someone worthy. When the spring comes, he said, forcing the words out, you could go north. Find your people. She was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you want, Nathaniel? For me to leave you? It's not what I want, he said, his own voice tight. It's what's best for you. I can't offer you anything but this, running and hiding. "You think I stayed because I was trapped?" she asked, her voice rising. "You think I kissed you because I had no other choice? I think you were hurt and scared, and I was the only one there." The slap was so fast he didn't see it coming. It cracked in the silent valley, and the sting on his cheek was nothing compared to the shock. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. She jumped to her feet, pacing like a caged animal. "How dare you presume to know my heart? I am not a helpless child, Nathaniel. I have had warriors court me. I have had traitors offer me an easy life. I chose none of them. I chose you." She stopped, standing over him, her eyes blazing. "Not because I was desperate, not because I was grateful, but because my heart saw something in you it had never found in any other man." The words were like blows, knocking down the last of his defenses. "But I have nothing," he whispered. "You have everything," she said, kneeling in front of him, her hands gentle on his face. "You are the man who fought for me. You are the man who carried me to safety. You are my chosen one. And I am yours. Not by chance. By choice." When she kissed him then, it was a claiming. A promise sealed in the heart of a sacred hidden place. They made love that night by the steaming spring, under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. It was a discovery for them both, awkward and fumbling at first, then tender and passionate. It was more than just physical. It was two broken pieces of a single soul finding each other and finally becoming whole. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the blankets, their bodies still humming, she whispered against his chest, "Now you understand. Now you know why I chose you." And he did. He finally did. They spent 3 perfect days in that hidden valley. A paradise found. But on the 4th morning, he saw it. A thin column of smoke rising from a neighboring valley. They weren't alone. Caution told them to run, but supplies were low. And then they heard it. The sound of children laughing. Soldiers don't travel with children. They approached the camp carefully. It was a small group, survivors. People from her village, her family. They were welcomed with tears and disbelief. But among them was a man named Grey Wolf. A warrior, handsome and proud, with scars that spoke of many battles. And the moment Nathaniel saw the way he looked at Ayanna, a cold knot formed in his stomach. That night, around the fire, the truth came out. "She was promised to me," Grey Wolf said, his voice hard. "Her father agreed to the marriage before the soldiers came." Nathaniel looked at Ayanna. She was staring into the flames, her face a mask. "Many promises died with the village," she said softly. "Some promises survive," Grey Wolf insisted, his eyes locking onto Nathaniel. "This man. What can he offer you? He cannot take you to his people. He cannot live among ours. He offers you a life with no home, no future." "I can offer her my love," Nathaniel said quietly. Grey Wolf spat into the fire. "A white man's love is a fickle thing. It burns hot and fast, then turns to ash. What happens when he grows tired of you? What of the children you bear, who will belong to neither world?" The words were poison because they were laced with truth. They were the same fears he'd been fighting himself. But then he looked at Ayanna, and he saw the unwavering trust in her eyes. "I will love her until my last breath," he said. The debate ended, but the tension remained. Then, a week later, the scouts returned with terrifying news. A large cavalry patrol was sweeping the mountains. A systematic search. They were being hunted. "We must scatter," an elder said. "It is the only way." "No," Grey Wolf said, his voice ringing with authority. "There is another way. One of us can lead them away. A false trail. A sacrifice, so the others may live." "I'll do it," Nathaniel said without hesitation. "No." Ayanna's voice was sharp as a blade. "You will not die for my people. They are my people now," he said, and the words felt truer than anything he had ever known. A look of grudging respect flickered in Grey Wolf's eyes. But a new plan began to form. Not sacrifice. Strategy. They wouldn't run from the hunters. They would turn the hunters into the hunted. They would lead the soldiers into Devil's Garden, a natural maze of stone canyons so twisted and confusing that a man could wander for weeks and never find his way out. As they stood at the edge of the maze, ready to put the plan into action, Grey Wolf turned to Nathaniel. "I courted her for 2 summers," the warrior said, his voice low. "I offered her horses, and my strength, and my name, but I never once saw her look at me the way she looks at you." He offered a sad, small smile. "She was never mine to lose, but she is yours to protect. Protect her, white man." The plan worked perfectly. They split up, leading the soldiers deeper and deeper into the stone labyrinth, laying false trails, their calls echoing off the walls to confuse and separate the patrol. Soon, the hunters were hopelessly lost, their curses and frustrated shouts growing fainter and fainter. They regrouped at the hidden exit, every man, woman, and child safe. They had done it. They were free. That night, they made a new camp, high in the mountains, under a sky full of stars. They were a small, battered group, the last remnant of a proud people. But they were alive. And they were together. Ayanna came to him in the darkness, taking his hand in hers. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start building. Not the life others wanted for us. The one we choose." He squeezed her hand, the truth of her words settling into his very soul. They had found each other in the ruins of a broken world. They had fought for each other. They had chosen each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "My chosen one," he whispered. He felt her smile against his shoulder in the dark. "Always," she promised, "until the stars fall from the sky." If you enjoyed this story of a love that defied all odds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the wild heart of the world.